G'day guys, hello. Well, my name is Rhys Griffiths and I work at Dairy Industry New Zealand, and I understand we're running a bit late, so I guess I'm the perfect person to make up a bit of time for those that have heard me speak before. No, it is great to see so many familiar faces out there. Welcome to Wellington and welcome to the business of Nagyong. Today's session is split into three quite key segments, so as always, I can't help but hop up and cover a bit about what's happened in the velvet industry, and it's been an interesting year, be fair to say. We were going to have Ian Scott come up here, but he got fogged in up in Hamilton, so fortunately we've got Paddy Boyd here from the NVSB that'll be talk about the new measures that hopefully, certainly the velvet producers should be a bit aware of. And then I reckon this is always the key part of the velvet session, is getting the sort of three bigger export companies up. So we've got Ross Chambers there from Provalco, Tony Cochran from PGG Wrightson, and Colin Stevenson, who's obviously also a board member from CK Import Export. So we'll have those guys come up. We've got Emil here as well from MPI, who's been quite instrumental in working with the industry and NVSB around these new measures. He'll come up. And Paddy will remain after his talk. So we won't have any questions after my talk, but I'd love you guys to start thinking about questions during all the presentations today, because I do have a few treats to try and get people to be, try and get people to start thinking about questions and involve questions from the floor to the panel. So last year I put up a slide and talked about three key risks when we sort of looked at what was going to be happening over the next year. And for those guys that can remember, those three risks were supply side risks, so the potential for overproduction, market concentration or the over-reliance on a few commodity type traders, and increasing regulatory hurdles. So I'm going to review the season now, and I'm going to take into consideration some of those risks. The first is supply side risks, and I don't believe we're in an oversupply situation at the moment. But the board has asked me to kind of demonstrate how we're fitting the markets with the increasing supply coming through. So I put this area in front of them, and I thought it would be of immense interest, for you folk here today, because it shows out the changing market that we operate in. So yep, they are brown. So the brown segment is our traditional Korean Oriental medicine section. So if we went back over the past sort of 6 years, 7 years, or further out than when the graph was up there, we would see probably 10, 15, 20 years ago that we had an 85% reliance on this market. Now all the importers are telling us that our market share within the segment is growing, but as you can see from the lines, this market is under huge pressure. And it's under huge pressure in the way that people are changing how they're consuming TCM type ingredients, and I'll cover that off shortly. The second segment is the green segment, is the healthy food market, and without trying to repeat myself, this is the market that I get quite enthused at. I heard Katrina getting quite excited by the video that she was showing, and this is the one that really gets me out in the morning. And the healthy food segment, which has been led by good friends at KGC, Korean Ginseng Corp, a few years ago, is really starting to dominate that picture. So the green and the brown, those nice earthy colours, are the Korean market, The red segment is the Chinese market. So that's what we estimate is being retained and consumed in China. Now, if you look at the straight export stats, that volume would be a lot bigger, but we know that there is a bunch of velvet that is retained and consumed in China, and most of the people that we deal with are saying that, or most of the larger importers are saying that the proportion that's processed and retained for the Chinese market is growing, and some would estimate that to be around about 60%. So it's growing very, very fast. The blue area is other markets such as Hong Kong and Taiwan, Japan. The US is our fourth biggest market, and Southeast Asia is becoming certainly an area of interest. So the challenge is, if we keep producing more, we need to expand our markets. Now, one of the things I want to say is the next graph I put up in front of you is not a volume forecast by any stretch of the imagination, but is how our markets might grow over the next couple of years. So you can see that we're still estimating that traditional Korean Oriental medicine market is going to come under continued pressure, and that's the feedback that we're getting from our close customers in the Oriental medicine trade, from the importers, from the doctors, and from the medical association. Our forecast, though, is that that green area will continue to grow, and we've got a lot of excitement, infectious excitement, I guess, that's happening in that realm, and I'll sort of cover that off shortly. And we're also pretty confident that that red segment will grow as well. So based upon the feedback that I'm getting, we see this as quite achievable over the sort of short term, but you can see why we raise this as a risk factor going forward. The next risk factor was market concentration, or the over-reliance on a few commodity-type traders. Many exporters and some importers said that they expected that there was no price upside in the market this year, and that was probably due to the reasonable price increases that we saw over the past few years. As such, they thought coming into the season, they thought there would likely be a softening just to reflect the exchange rate and what have you, which they thought was going to be around about 15%. So that was kind of where things were going, and that was, that varied a bit between RMB or Korean won, US dollar, etc. Now, we all know that the markets are driven by fear and greed, and the velvet industry is no exception. There was always the usual rhetoric, no matter how the season looks as we're coming into it, there's always a usual rhetoric. Importers, or some importers, grasping at whatever they can do to try and negotiate better prices. There was a lot of pessimism this year about the ability of China to be able to import velvet this season due to factors I'll cover shortly. But what is clear now is that trade to China at the early part of the season continued at or even above rates that we've seen for previous years. However, at the time, this rhetoric did gain traction, and it did lead to a further than 15%, around about that 20% price decrease for the season. So it was certainly further than what most of the main exporters had hoped for. On to the last risk, and that's the risk of regulatory hurdles. So first, we had a couple of regulatory hurdles this year. So the first one was the requirement by the Ministry for Food and Drug Safety, the Korean Food and Drug Safety, for all export plants of food products to be listed under their website. So although we were first off the rank, I guess many of the, or MPI tell me that many of the velvet export companies got themselves registered. It was quite a procedure to go through, because you're looking at a website up there, but when you were going onto that website, clicking on the down buttons, they'd either be in Korean or there'd be spelling mistakes, and it was just really difficult to load your premises onto. But the awesome thing is trade continued, and we managed to sort of navigate our way through this initial hurdle. The second one is a regulatory change in China. So what happened this year? Well, we were notified late last season that velvet must only be imported into China from New Zealand as a TCM ingredient. Up until then, it had gone through into China as an agricultural byproduct, or more latterly as a food. Now, as far as we understand it, this type of scrutiny or this type of focus isn't just focused on velvet. China are generally looking at ways to improve their food safety, and they're looking at many different industries, as I'm sure you've read in the paper, with other industries that have had similar areas and issues to sort of navigate their way through. One of the amazing things is, though, when the officials started thinking about traditional Chinese medicine, they thought about velvet. And then they started thinking about velvet, and they thought about New Zealand. So in many ways, I see this as quite a compliment to our industry. The new TCM regulations mean that there will be changes in the processes here in New Zealand, which Paddy will cover shortly, and changes in the processes to how they handle velvet in China. So in New Zealand, we need to establish a formal process with regulation created and enforced by MPI. In China, the importers need to also gain a pharmaceutical traders or a pharmaceutical processors license. And these licenses are quite involved. They need one or the other, but they're quite involved. So even factories that built themselves to a GMP standard failed to attain these licenses at the early part of the season. In many cases, they require a significant upgrade. So what do the new changes mean for us? As I say, we're lucky enough to have Paddy along to sort of explain them in a little bit more detail. But from a market perspective, I believe that the new standards provide new opportunities. for the last couple of years, we've been searching for ways to replicate the type of success that we've had in the South Korean market with the healthy food, and we have made some good gains. Last year, we managed to get a taxonomic appraisal on New Zealand deer as similar to Malu, which is recognised under their sort of Chinese pharmacopoeia and healthy functional food. So that was by a Chinese lab. So we've made some good ground in this, but we still haven't got the confidence by large healthy food companies in China to import and spend the significant type of resource that we've seen happen in Korea for New Zealand velvet to be used as an ingredient in health foods. There's still been that sort of nervousness about where it sits. So I see these new opportunities. I see the audit by the Chinese late last year coming out to New Zealand, the recognition by them that New Zealand velvet is a Chinese TCM ingredient and must be imported as such. I see this as quite a big step in the right direction for us, and a chance to sort of unlock the potential to grow that red section that I've just sort of talked a bit about. And I'll go through an example probably on about my last slide. At this point, I do want to say that MPI has been incredibly constructive with the industry in terms of shaping the requirements, and certainly to date, the Chinese officials in terms of the way that we've gone through this have been really, really fair. So, what happened this season? Well, we saw a series of delays in China through issuing out the import permits, and that was due to the classification of the TCM ingredient and the enforcement of how it was handled in China. So fortunately, those Chinese officials did provide a bit of a solution to work through, and that came through sort of later on in the season. But until the stage, trade had actually continued. And it continued because officials enabled the importers in the Chinese market to continue to import under their existing or their old import licenses that were still valid. So they still had a year's life on them, and they still might have had a percentage of velvet that they're allowed to import in. So the officials recognised that it was a complicated start to the season, and they enabled those importers to carry on importing. And so they did. They imported at pretty significant rates. And in fact, volume exports up until Christmas, as I've said, were at or even above levels that have occurred previously. Those new import permits came just in time. So they came around about February, and I guess at that stage, the old import permits were starting to run their life. But the biggest area I was probably most disappointed with was that the Korean traders at that stage had started to hold off. So although the trade had continued through China, the Koreans were starting to hold off because they were worried about the prices dropping further. So some were legitimate concerns. They didn't want to buy in a whole lot of velvet and have stock sitting there devaluing. But there were some rumours out there that that traders had held off in an attempt to help prices to weaken. In December, many of these traders had realised that that trade was continuing with China. So many of these Korean traders had realised that, and so they started placing orders. But in a lot of cases, it was too late. And in many cases, I've just been up to the market. In many cases, the Korean importers want access to more velvet this year. And this graph shows a bit of a picture why. So we can see again this is from October to March, and we can see again the significant rise that we've seen in exports to our key markets and the role that China has played this year. But the disappointing factor is the reducing amount going through into South Korea. I believe this will change, and certainly this is the feedback that I've had from many of the importers in the market. I think that those importers in Korea will look to try and engage with the market, hopefully a little bit earlier, to try and get access to velvet, because A, they get an advantage over a free trade agreement that no other supplying countries have got, and B, just to get access to product. So that was the first part of my two-part series, I guess. So the second part is really about promoting New Zealand velvet in the markets. So promoting New Zealand velvet, or promoting New Zealand Ngogyong. It's at this point I really want to say that our friends at Korean Ginseng Corp, and many of you guys have heard about this large ginseng company that have seemed to have adopted Ngogyong or velvet as their next big ingredient after ginseng. They've kind of lifted up the advertising to a whole new level. They spend millions and millions of dollars each year on advertising, on integrated campaigns. And over the Christmas period and leading up to the Chinese New Year, they'd put together this new advert, which they're airing on primetime TV and through the web pages.
뉴질랜드 정부가 보증한 건강한 녹용 중에 정관장이 한 번 더 까다롭게 골라 촌녹의 이름을 허락합니다. 이제 녹용에서 촌녹으로 녹용의 원칙을 세우다. 정관장 촌녹.
He's actually a very smiley character, isn't he? You know, the embassy folk, the actor actually is an incredibly famous actor, and the embassy folk were contacting us after the New Zealand embassy up in South Korea were contacting us into the new year saying, do you guys know anything about this? This is pretty amazing. Everyone's sort of talking about this new ad from Zhong Wenjung from KGC. The actor is so famous that it even made the tabloid newspapers in China about his starring in an ad that talked about New Zealand velvet, New Zealand Nogyong. They've also since added more products to their velvet line, and I've got a couple here actually. And the incentive that I'm going to give out for people to ask questions during the panel session is you can try each one of these new products. They're the new Chongnok products. So the thin pouch is part of their is part of their well recognised Anytime brand, and the big fatter juice pouch is a bit more of a traditional pouch. And they contain a gram of New Zealand velvet in every single one of them, and they're heavily marketed even within their product literature as being of New Zealand velvet. But what's really awesome is, you know, KGC success and your KGC sort of proactive advertising has created an interesting predicament for us at Dairy Industry New Zealand. We're starting to get other companies, and not small companies either, lining up or knocking on our doors saying, hey, we really want to promote the New Zealandness of our new velvet products that we're starting to get into as well. And many of you guys will remember me putting this brand up last year, but this is a company, LG is a company that I've been meeting with, or we've been meeting with now over the past couple of years. They launched their new product last year or the year before now that contains velvet, and they've really got in behind the country of origin system that we've got, and it's sort of a bit like an Intel, I guess, on an HP computer or whatever. It's about showing our brand as a branded ingredient within their own packaging. So I was up there a couple of weeks ago. I met with the LG Household and Healthcare brand manager, and we agreed to a bunch of promotional activity coming up to the season. As with KGC, our spend or our proportion is very, very small in comparison to what they can do. And in fact, our small part that we play is really on helping educate their 20-odd thousand sales counsellors at their sales training seminars, which are happening from now over the next few months. So they've done a bunch of interviews, and there's a bunch of New Zealand velvet products that they're going to be trying before they go out into the streets of South Korea to try and promote their product. So the latest company to get involved in New Zealand velvet product is a company called Lotte. Anyone that has been up to Asia will be quite familiar with this company. They're quite a big brand in the retail segment, and they came out to New Zealand in November last year. Really fortunate, PGG were out hosting them, and PGG asked for us to get involved in November, and a huge thanks to all the farmers that were involved in doing a lot of the filming for their advertising. But Dr. Lee, the guy you can see there, is the product that he's really famous for. He left New Zealand so enthused. He went back to Korea, launched his brand new tea product in January, and again, his tea product, which retails in the tens of millions of US dollars, was a huge success. So we'll just have a look at their advertising as well.
천혜의 자연 환경에서 자유롭게 자랐는지, 이경재 원장이 직접 가서 눈으로 확인한 우수한 녹용인지, 뉴질랜드에서 한 번, 이경재 원장이 한 번 더 귀한 녹용의 영양을 담아 일명 국민 녹용의 기준을 만듭니다. 이경재 더 힘찬 녹용.
So both this and the KGC ads, they're not small ads, they're not hidden in some corner of the web and what have you. They are quite prominent, and they've got people talking about New Zealand Nogyong on the street, and you'll see it quite well advertised. So one of the key take-home messages that we kept on trying to give out over the course of the season, when there's a bit of uncertainty out there, but one of the key take-home messages that I want to give people is that the underlying demand, certainly in South Korea, for New Zealand Nogyong is really strong, and we believe that it's increasing in China as well. And in fact, this graph demonstrates the level of exports and how we've been going. So these are the latest official stats that I've just taken off the DINS database, and we've hit 52 million bucks worth of exports year on year. So many of you guys will be sitting in the audience and asking me, well, how does next year look? I'm going to buy a few more stags and what have you. How does next year look? And that's really hard to predict. And you know, I'd be crazy if I was standing up here trying to predict how things look. You know, there were a few issues in the market this year, and we've got to make changes to make sure we can adapt and keep promoting product. But there are three key things I want to keep in the front of your mind. The New Zealand-Korea Free Trade Agreement. You know, this was signed and implemented on the 1st of December in 2015, and it does provide a unique advantage for New Zealand processed velvet. Unique advantage. There are no other of our competitors that currently trade into South Korea that have this. China, Australia, Canada, no one else has got this. By the 1st of January next year, this advantage will be at 5.3%. I've just spent a bit of time on the Korean healthy food market, and the infectious momentum that KGC is creating out there by advertising New Zealand Nogyong. And New Zealand is well positioned to take advantage of that. There are a couple of other, you know, pretty reasonable companies that I haven't gone through today that are also really interested as well. And finally, the opportunities brought about by the change. And Bruce Cottrell talked about, you know, changes and what have you. And we've got to keep changing. We've got to keep adapting. But these changes are going to be quite exciting in terms of our engagement with the Chinese market. So this is a company that I saw 2 weeks ago up in northern part of China. They're a really large pharmaceutical company. So they've got all the necessary pharmaceutical processing licenses and what have you. I saw them a couple of weeks ago, and I sat down with them and I said, have you heard about these changing regulations? And they said, yes, they had. And they believed that it would be really good for the New Zealand velvet industry. They said, in fact, we've just launched this product. We launched this product last year. We spent 100 million RMB in the launch of this product. It's 20 million New Zealand bucks. So they're not a small company. And we believe this, because we're looking for the mass market, we believe this product would be really good for New Zealand velvet. They estimate when this product's up and running, it could take about 10 tonnes of dried New Zealand velvet. So these are the type, I'm using them as an example. I'm not saying we've clinched the deal or anything, but these are a type of an example of a type of company that we could be working with these new regulations. So what do we need to watch for? Well, as I say, we're going to go through the new measures, so please make sure that you're compliant with the new measures coming into the season. We do need to be mindful of the increasing production levels, and one of the things I know I'm really strong about, but is to support those strong value chains, not commodity-based. So support those guys that are reinvesting in the industry and with a good vision to those healthy food type companies. So in summary, there's still risks, and we saw some of those risks play out over the past year. But I do believe that the next medium term looks pretty positive for our industry. Thank you very much.